Teenagers and BB guys.
I know. That's kind of the way those are down around South End. They have metal siding on them and all sorts of things.
Hi, everybody. We've got a couple special presentations before we get started this evening. These are a couple of employees that have been with us for a while. First employee is Ronnie Bacon. He's been with us for 30 years, which is incredible, I believe.
As much as he's incredible, he is incredible.
Thank you very much.
And the other employee we have tonight is Juan Ramirez, and he had 15 years of service with the city of Bethany. I don't think Juan's here tonight, but he will get his tomorrow. So thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody. I call to order the Bethany City Council meeting for Tuesday, April 3rd, 2018. Would you please rise for the invocation and the flag salute? Mr. Knapp.
All right, if you'll join me, face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please pray with me. Heavenly Father, we come to you and we ask that you would give us your wisdom and your insight, and you would help us to make wise decisions to help lead our city and our citizens into our greatest days thus far. We thank you for your hand of protection and for your many blessings. And Father God, we ask that you would help the thunder beat the warriors tonight. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Item 1 tonight is the consent docket, items A and B. Do I have a motion for approval?
Mr. Mayor, I had some questions related to the consent docket, if I may.
Okay.
I noticed that we are still spending, $8,500 for the rental of a street sweeper. Is that normal practice? Are we going to continue to do that?
We rent the street sweeper when we're using it.
Okay, so what do? We rent it every other month, or?
We rent it every quarter, I think.
Okay.
How much does it cost to fix ours?
$1 million and a prayer. I really have no idea. It's been down for a long time.
Is that being used in conjunction with the project that we had to clean out the ditches and the inlets and things like that?
That was one of the purposes that they first got it. I don't know where it's at in the project right now.
Well, Councilman Herron told me about the project on Redmond that was pretty extensive, but I haven't seen any cleaning of inlets in my area in Ward 2, which would be primarily where I live, and north of 50th. Is there any way we could get some kind of a report on that?
Get you an update.
Because I think it's my understanding that that was part of the project, and then we would clean those out, and then we would use the street sweeper to maintain the inlets and the drainage, but I don't see that that's been done. So I just wanted to follow up on that.
Okay.
And my second issue is with ImageNet. We are spending an inordinate amount of money to manage our IT and Laserfish. to the extent of $5,000, give or take. Have we audited that to confirm that there are any other available alternatives that we could find that would be economically feasible? It seems like that's excessive.
Well, when we went out for the original bid, that was the best product we could get for a very good price. We can go out and do it again if you'd like to do it. If the council would like to do it, we can go out and do it again.
Well, that might be a factor to consider. I just, in today's competitive market, I think that we should be able to beat that price. And I think we should really, really look at that, because I just get kind of a nauseous feeling when I see all these expenditures and we're not getting value for our dollar. And maybe that's not the best example, but it's something that we should be concerned about. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Do I have a motion of approval?
Motion to approve this consent docket.
Second.
Please cast your votes. Item 2 tonight is receive comments and recommendations from the Bethany Library Committee for the Bethany Library Playground Bid Award and the Bethany Library Park Amenities Change Order. Arlita, do you have some info?
Tonight I'd like to introduce and thank those who were on the Playground Committee. I think when they said yes, they thought that might last a week or so. And they really worked all through the summer and fall and have worked for a long time. So I'd like to introduce them: Susan Westmoreland, who's a special ed teacher in Mustang, Kelly Johnson from the Children's Center, and Katie King, who will do the presentation tonight on behalf of the Bethany Parks Committee. And they've worked since last summer. They've visited parks. They've talked with playground designers. All of this is in an effort to have a really great all abilities library, park, and playground. So Katie will do the presentation, and then we'll be able to answer any questions and comments.
Thank you for having me. My name is Katie King. I'm a part of the Playground Committee, and I'm a Bethany resident and want to
Choke on the,
there we go. Hi, my name is Katie King. I am a member of the Playground Committee, and I live on 8221 Northwest 39th Street. What I'd like to do today is to present to you a recommendation and to present to you the results of our work over the last several months. So, if you'll direct your attention to the slides, please. First, I'm going to remind you why we did this. We did this because we have a goal in mind for our city, and we want to create a place with this playground where all children can play, learn, and develop their skills regardless of ability in a fun and creative environment. This is really important because it's inclusive, and we want Bethany to be an inclusive place that's known for its hospitality. So again, and you've seen this list before, why do we care about play? These are the goals that we set forth for our playground, and really they're goals for any playground. Things like social competence, things like exploration, things like physical development, things like social interaction, developing those social skills, which are really, really important in the 21st century. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna look at the pieces of the playground that were in our basis for design, and then we're going to look at the three-dimensional models of what the basis for design and the award-winning bid, or at least I hope that you will affirm our recommendations, what those look like. So you've seen the schematics before. Here's a review of those. And then here is the three-dimensional images from our recommended bid to you. We have not picked out colors yet, so if you are looking with a very literal brain, please keep that in mind. These are not the colors that we picked out. This is a representative overview. So we have some different components, and I've only put a few examples. There are certainly tons of examples that I could show for these, but I've picked out probably the most notable. So we've got some swinging and swaying involved. And we have components that teach kids how to balance well. I should also note that these components are able to teach kids who maybe don't have full physical control of themselves how to balance. And so that's really important when you get kids playing together, perhaps one child who is all abled and perhaps one child who is disabled. Climbing components. components for sensory development. This one happens to be my personal favorite. Included in this is a roller slide. Not featured here because we don't have, it's a custom roller slide, so we don't have a picture of that yet. Social interaction components. These components also support parallel play. And if you haven't heard that term before, it is where kind of what I previously described, where we've got kids of two differing sets of abilities that can play next to each other regardless of the equipment in front of them. So here is a three-dimensional look from the side. This is of one aspect of the park. Here is another look, kind of from the opposite side. And then our third and final three-dimensional overview. So that's what we have. Do you have any questions for me or for the committee?
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you. As many as can fit on the structure. I don't know, I don't have that specific number in mind.
You talking about at any one given time, Mr. Shire? You talking about at any one given time?
Yeah, at any one given time.
So it certainly is not 15 children. There are plenty of stations, and at, I think it was what, around 8,000 square feet? And if one person occupies an average of 3 square feet, I mean, theoretically, we could pack 2,000 people onto that space. But I don't think that would be very conducive to play. I would probably estimate conservatively 250.
250. Have we brought anything in to consider what our yearly maintenance would be and what it would cost to maintain it?
That is not
in a safe manner, because this is a all-conclusive playground, and it must be maintained
indeed
at a very high standard to accommodate the people that have handicaps that would be in there.
Yes. So I can tell you what the warranties on various products are, but in terms of what the city estimates for maintenance, that's not a question for the playground committee. That would be a city question. I can tell you on the pour in place, the bid that we have was for 7 years. So we should get 7 years out of use without any touching by the city of Bethany, theoretically, except perhaps for the occasional spray. On the shades, I don't recall the number, I think it was 10 or 15 years, but I could be wrong on that. And that involves being taken down every winter, so we don't have snow or ice piled on top. That would add to the use or wear of the fabric. Everything else is rated at least, I want to say at least 15 years, but I could be wrong on that because it could be longer than that. So we'd have to pull the specific warranty information, but I think you guys already have that if you've got a bid package. So as far as the city's maintenance, that would not be a question that I could answer on behalf of the playground committee.
So you feel certain that the personnel that we have in the city can maintain this?
It is not within the scope of the Bethany Playground Committee to make recommendations on competence for city members. So
that would be an additional cost that we may have to.
That would be a question for the acting city manager.
Yeah.
You want to repeat your question, please?
Do you have a possible answer to my question? Was what is our annual maintenance going to be on this? I mean, it's a premier playground. I mean, it is really nice. It accommodates 250 people at a time, and it's going to be well used. So that means wear, and it also means that we have to maintain. Well, we all do have to maintain the area inside of that.
Eventually, we will need to maintain that, yeah. To try to hazard a guess as to what that would cost right now would be simply hazarding a guess, and I could not answer that question. As far as taking care of the grounds, I would think it would cost no more than any other park that we have.
Like $1 a square foot or something?
No, I'm thinking not nearly $1. I'm thinking we're not taking care of Busch Stadium.
Yes.
We're taking care of some parks.
This isn't a grassed area, it's a special rubber coating over concrete, which has a specific warranty on it, so it's not gonna have to be watered or mowed or anything like that, so until it starts deteriorating, I would think there'd be very little maintenance on the park itself.
Mr. Davis, I have a question for you. Since this is on library property, and since the library fund is paying for it, does the municipal library system have any say in this maintenance or care or decision-making?
This will be a city park, be insured by the city, and
But the funds are coming from the library fund, aren't they?
but that was those are Bethany funds. The library's contribution to this project was basically the design cost. The construction cost is funded from the general obligation bond that the citizens passed, and this will be paid from those same funds.
I should mention that it was the unanimous recommendation of the Playground Committee to the Library Committee that this bid be awarded to the lowest and best bidder. So, if there's nothing else, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Katie.
And I'd like to say thank you to those ladies for doing this, because I do believe we will have the best playground around. So I'm excited about that. Item 3 is consideration and possible approval of award of the Bethany Library playground equipment to the Playwell Group, Playworks Incorporated, the lowest and best bidder. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Please cast your votes. Item 4 is consideration and possible approval of Shiloh's change order 5 for the Bethany Library Park amenities. Do I have a report or any kind of word on what these change orders are or anything?
The change orders cover the work that needs to be done for the gazebo and the parking addition, the fencing, the irrigation. They're all items that you as a council said you wanted in the project. So this is the cost of doing those, and the Council Library Committee recommended this award, which is funded from the Bond Contingency Fund, and it totals $235,920 for everything involved. So, as chair of the Library Committee, I move approval of change order 5 for the library park amenities.
Do I have a second?
Could we possibly get the review of the library budget before? I mean, is this still right in line with budget with everything else?
Yeah, that's next. Right.
I'll second.
But before we I mean, are we
Oh.
still in line with budget?
Oh,
Because
yeah.
this is additions to it, so,
No, we're good.
okay.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Please cast your votes. Item 5 is review of the Bethany Library budget. Do we have a
Todd,
report?
do you want to do that? Todd Olberding has been our project manager. I think he has a different title probably, but he has kept track of all of the funding, so he can let you know where this stands. And you do have it in your packet with some yellow lines on it.
Thank you again. My name is Todd Oberding, and the intent of providing this updated recap of where we are with the budget is to answer your question, John, about where we are with funding on this. The actual library park amenities that you just approved actually came in about $60,000 below what the engineer's estimate was for that work. So, and that work is being funded through by the construction contingency that we have in our budget and have carried for some time. And so you'll see in your packet there that line item 1 refers and projects the cost for that change order number 5, which you just approved. being subtracted from the existing contingency, and you'll see down below there where construction contingency balance. On the far right-hand side, you'll see that we still have $386,000 in construction contingency, which is where we are with the project. We've had really a good project. We have a good set of documents, and we've had very few change orders. Many of the change orders actually have been deducts on total, and so we're right where we should be. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't be surprised if we'll see at least half of that number saved at the end of the project. And down there, item number 2 talks about the playground, the park playground. We had a budget of $440,000, which was $400,000 for the project and $40,000 for construction contingency. And as you can see, we have a remaining balance of $47,405 in the playground. And then the last thing I probably could draw your attention to is about where it says project contingencies down at the bottom there. It shows MLS we don't know what their contingencies are, but Bethany is listed as $625,000. It would be anticipated that those would be savings that would also be available to basically use in the project if needed, and if not, they could be reverted, given back to through tax, put into the sinking fund, I guess. So, any questions?
Thank you, Todd.
Do I have a motion to receive the report on the Bethany Library budget? Do I have a second?
Second.
Please cast your votes. Item 6 is approval of proposed location of park amenities and trees within Eldon Lyon Park. Do we have a report on the location or the amenities?
Good evening, everybody. This is for the trees and improvements at Eldon Lyon Park for the grant that we were awarded. The presentation was done at the last council meeting. This was heard by our Planning and Zoning Commission, and they approved it unanimously, so now it is before you for your consideration. This is a picture of the overall plan. The Parks and Recreation and Tree Committee has looked at adding some benches, bike racks, pet way stations, and picnic tables to Eldon Lyon Park as part of their grant. They are also putting in $6,000 of their budget to do some amenities as well with the trees, and this is what they have decided on as part of their amenities to add to the park. They went out and they walked the park and decided on these amenities and these locations in the park where they think these amenities are best used as far as where they're needed and amenities are not at currently. The tree placement is going to be there. I have Phil here to talk about the tree placement. If y'all have questions about where we're actually going to be placing the trees, he can answer all your questions about that and tell you all about the reasoning behind the trees we're doing and why we're placing them where we're placing them. And I'll let him come up and speak in just a moment if y'all have questions about that for sure. That's an overview of where the trees are being planted and placed at. Kind of an overview from the aerial. And I'm going to let him speak on this slide because this is kind of a overview of different types of trees and where they're going to go. And I'll let him kind of tell you the reasoning behind that since he is our expert.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, this originally evolved from an issue with the Siberian elms that are no longer at the site. Those Siberian elms were displaying symptoms of disease as well as being in conflict with the overhead electric lines. And we were approached by the then city manager to see if we could come up with a solution to keep the benefits of the trees, but do away with the problems and the liability of the Siberian elms. We talked with the Park Task Force Committee about our proposed solution of having the elms removed. We did that with a cooperative effort with the electric provider, OG&E. They came in there and they removed the elm trees. City crews are grinding the stumps. We've been on that for about a week. We're into our second week now. And the other part of the solution was to replace the trees that were removed with more suitable trees that won't get in conflict with the lines, yet still provide shade, from the south sun on that side of the sidewalk for pedestrians, as well as providing a screening effect from traffic along 36th. The trees that were chosen do well in Oklahoma. Some of them are Oklahoma recommended. We've got some small maples, Chinese pistache, and also we want to put in some summer color with crepe myrtles. The trees will be spaced 30 feet apart. The crepe myrtles will be spaced 10 feet apart. We will also be planting some trees along the glade side also. The original design had 61 trees total and 31 crepe myrtles. When the grant came in, we didn't get everything we asked for, but we got the majority of it. They approved enough money, $13,800 for 46 trees, so that's a reduction. What I did was go back in the secondary design, and where we had the trees spaced out at 20 feet, we increased that by 10 feet and to 30 feet. And that way it'll still have the same effect along 36th, and also allow approximately 12 trees to go up the glade side, where quite a few have been removed there, some of the Siberian elms. So we believe it's a good plan, and we are networking with the folks that approved the grant or gave us the grant, and we hope with your approval that we'll move forward with this and get these things in the ground.
Phil, how big are these trees you're talking about that you're gonna?
They will vary in size, Councilman. The ones that'll be between the sidewalk and the overhead conductors, they will max out at about 25 feet in width. And
No, I mean, when you initially plant them, right, if you're gonna plant today, are they 4-foot trees?
We are asking for 1 3/4 to 2 inch caliper trees. That's measured at breast height. So a 2 inch tree, about the size of a 2 inch pipe. So they'll be sizable.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
How many trees did you subtract from your original plan, did you say?
The primary design was 61, got reduced to 46.
And what is the cost difference that we asked for and received in the grant? Or how much would those additional 20 trees cost?
20 trees, I would say let's put a price tag installed, $300 a piece. So
6,000?
Yeah, thereabouts. And
Do we not have other park funds that we could use to supply for the other 20 trees?
I'm sure we could probably look into that. We wanted to do that with the crepe myrtles because the crepe myrtles weren't funded either, but we sure want to keep that summer color along that sidewalk.
Do you know the approximate number of trees that were removed?
I believe along the 36th Street side, they were 36 to 38 trees, and I believe about 24 along Glade.
So about 60 trees.
Yes, sir.
Now, Phil, if you went with a tree that's a little smaller in size, it's gonna cost you a little less.
Mm-hmm.
Could you stretch the budget out just a little bit by buying smaller trees as opposed to the larger ones?
I'm sure that's a possibility. We would have to talk with the gentleman that we're looking at to have plant these things for us and see what those options are. If you're looking as far as from the effect in the original design where these trees are going to be spaced 20 feet apart, we're just adding 10 yards. Yeah, I'm sorry. 10 yards in between each one to 30 feet. So, I'm sorry, we're adding 10 feet. I'm sorry. Yeah, 10 feet. So we're not adding that much in between with the secondary design. I think we'll still get the desired effect, but we can sure look into the options of finding the funds for the fully mounted trees and looking at smaller trees also. We can sure do that.
Have we explored the possibility of getting our trees from the Oklahoma Forestry Department?
Did not, we did not pursue that at all. This was all some conditions of the grant.
I've ridden down there with Mr. Shire's nephew and picked up 1,000 trees at a time. And they give little or no money. They will give you supply a lot of trees.
How big were they?
Some were seedlings, some were inch.
Yes, sir. Okay.
I will say too, as part of the grant for some of those trees, we have to use a certain person to get at least the trees for the grant. The additional trees, we could definitely look at some other options potentially, but we also want to make sure that they're going to survive, because part of this, the Oklahoma City Community Foundation is going to be watching and making sure that the trees survive, and we want them to be able to survive and thrive for the next 50, 100 years or however long they'll last.
I agree with the councilman about as much money as we spend on things, we need to do what it takes to make those trees right.
As I recall, Mr. Doherty, when he made the presentation, said they would purchase the trees, have them installed, and supervise the installation. So
yes,
I suspect if you went to a different provider, they might want to talk about that.
that's correct.
I, for one, love the trees there, and I don't think we could put back too many. So, but I'm very pleased with this overall.
Was there any consideration for the dogwood tree? You know how you tell a dogwood tree? By its bark.
Anyway.
Just saying, had to go there.
Can you provide some, Mr. Mayor, if I may, after that really bad joke?
Just a dad joke. I
We
actually
can
stole that from my dad.
Bring it back to focus here. What maintenance would be required for this amount of trees? My initial reaction, and I've planted some trees, but how do you water those? What's the maintenance schedule? How can we ensure that these are going to be maintained and cared for? Obviously, because given an opportunity, we might want to apply for that grant at some other point after this. So can you walk me along through that process?
We sure can. First and foremost, you want to pick a tree that will do well in the environment you're going to plant it in. Not talking to Mike. First and foremost, you want to pick a tree that will do well in the environment you're going to plant it in. So that requires knowledge of what does well in Oklahoma and this part of Oklahoma. So we did that. As far as planting, well, let me back up once, and it's the selection of the trees. You want to be sure that you have a vigorous root system and the tree hasn't been dinged up or scarred and things like that. So the stalk will be inspected. When you're planting a tree, it's not rocket science, but there is a few rules that you need to abide by. The proper depth of hole, not planting the tree too deep or too high, being sure that you get all the air pockets out once you backfill it. You want to create a dirt berm around the new tree that will hold water, allow water to settle in. Trees in Oklahoma require supplemental watering for the first 3 growing seasons, and then after that they're on their own. So we would be looking at a combination of using gator bags, and also we are going to put together what I will call a watering rig, a tow-behind trailer with a 200-gallon tank, a pump, and a hose reel on it. And while we're out there, we'll hand water these things. Now, in the heat of the summer, you might be looking at doing that twice a week. The benefit of this design that was considered is it's all in a straight line, and it's close to a driving surface. So that'll really help the efficiency of filling up the gator bags and also hand watering. So basically, you need to take care of a tree for 3 seasons to allow its roots to establish in the environment and adapt where it's at, and we certainly have the capability of doing that.
Did you consult OG&E related to their preference regarding what type of trees they would like to have for these in the area of these power lines?
I did have some discussion with their certified arborist, and we talked shop a little bit, and they were in agreement that the trees that we're planting are just fine. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of these are on the list called Oklahoma Proven, which means OSU is throwing them out there and got them established to see how they perform in Oklahoma. So I think we're just fine there.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing the progress, because I think Eldon Lyon is a valuable jewel in the Bethany, for its residents. I would love to see something comparable to some really well planned out parks that you see in other municipalities, where the attention to detail is very apparent, and the maintenance is always, you know, up to par and done well. So I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Yes, sir.
I know there's a couple people in this room that have asked about the sunning the cars or protecting the cars when it either hail or gets hot. Are the trees gonna be at least as far north-south as they were? Are they gonna be planted north or south?
Probably a little further north, you know,
That's
between
the
the
concern.
sidewalk and the overhead conductors.
How far?
I would say at least, if you're looking at the space in between the sidewalk and the first overhead conductor, probably right in the middle of that space. So I would say if you're looking at where the placement was of the old elm trees, we're probably going another 12 to 15 feet towards the sidewalk.
Which will take away from the protecting
Yes,
cars.
sir.
The cars will no longer be protected.
Yes, sir.
Protected from the sun.
Protected from the sun, protected from the heat. I mean, I don't think it's a deal breaker, but
I think if we got any closer, or these trees were placed in such a way that even though their height requirement wouldn't get in the lines, but the width requirement would infringe underneath their lines, that the electric provider might have issue with that.
Mr. Mayor, make a motion to approve item number 6 related to the approval of proposed location of park amenities and trees within Eldon Lyon Park.
Second.
Please cast your votes. Thank you.
Thank you.
And just for those who are curious, the Thunder Trail, the Warriors, 43 to 37. So, but OG&E passed 290 to 44 by 87%. So, in case you were wondering. Item 7, adoption of resolution number 1502, designating the week of April 8th through April 14th of 2018 as National Telecommunicator Week in the city of Bethany. And I asked Chief Cole if he would come and share with us what that is and read the resolution for us.
Good morning, evening. Thank you, council, for this time to talk about the telecommunicators in our city. And you might know them by another name, dispatchers. I cannot say enough about these folks. They do an incredibly difficult job, often under very difficult circumstances. In our police communications center, we have people that answer both police calls, fire calls, and ambulance calls. So if you just looked at those 3 tasks, just those type of phone calls coming in 24 hours a day, just for police, fire, and medical services, you think, wow, they're working hard. But it's so much more than that. They're receptionists. They have to answer the 7-digit phone lines. We have 6 of those. And in between answering the phones, dispatching calls that are generated by folks in our city, they have to keep track of where our police officers are, what they're doing, what information they might need. They have to keep track of the fire department, their personnel, what buildings they're in, what units are assigned where. An incredible multitasking ability that I wish that I had. And truly, they are the lifelines for the citizens in this city, and they are the lifelines for the police and fire that often do a dangerous job. So once a year, we recognize those folks, and truly, they are the unsung heroes of law enforcement. They suffer a lot of the same traumas, stresses that officers on the street suffer. You know, they often have to deal with people on their very worst day of their lives. They have to show both professionalism and compassion, and when you do that for years and years, that can weigh on you. And they're an incredible bunch of folks that we take for granted too often, and I want to thank the council for every year, 1 week, we set aside a time to honor these folks, and I'd like to read the resolution, and I'll try to be quick. Whereas in 1991, congressional resolution named the second full week in April of every year National Telecommunicator Week. Whereas emergencies can occur at any time or any place and require the assistance of police, fire, or emergency medical services. Whereas 911 is the hotline for help for people in emergency situations, and the 911 call taker's voice is the first assurance that help is on the way. Whereas 911 professionals regularly meet the challenges of extremely stressful situations with calmness and efficiency. Whereas, when an emergency occurs, the prompt response of police officers, firefighters, and paramedics is critical to the protection of life and preservation of property. And whereas the safety of these emergency responders is dependent upon the quality and accuracy of information obtained from citizens who telephone the 911 center. And whereas public safety dispatchers are the heart of public safety, providing assistance before any other emergency services arrive on scene. And whereas public safety dispatchers are a vital link for our emergency responders by monitoring their activities by radio, providing them information, and ensuring their safety. And whereas public safety dispatchers contribute substantially to the apprehension of criminals, the suppression of fires, and treatment of injuries and illnesses on a daily basis. And whereas each dispatcher has exhibited compassion, understanding, and professionalism during the performance of his or her daily job duties. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the City of Bethany, Oklahoma declares the week of April 8th through the 14th, 2018 to be National Telecommunicator Week in honor of the men and women whose diligence and professionalism keep our region's citizens and emergency responders safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Thank you.
Do I have a motion to
Mr.
adopt resolution number 1503, or no,
Mr. Mayor,
1502?
can I say one thing?
Sure.
As a member of the 911 Association of the Central Oklahoma Government's Board of Regents and Directors, Bethany sets the standard. And they are known throughout the area for a pretty high standard related to our dispatchers. So with that in mind, this is well-deserved, and I'm glad they're being acknowledged. That
Do
is
I have a motion?
Second.
Please cast your votes. Item 8 is adoption of resolution number 1503, creating a non-fiscal trust fund to receive and administer funds for the design, construction, installation, and related activities pertaining to a veterans memorial on public property, and providing restrictions on expenditures and use of these funds. As you know, a couple weeks ago, I asked council to get together within their wards amongst council members and pick a veteran amongst you two. So I'm hoping that you guys can bring 4 veterans that will sit on this committee. But this right here, this trust fund, will allow citizens to give towards this and receive a tax-deductible donation as a result, and it will all be used for this veterans monument, and then things pertaining to veterans that committee may see fit that they want to try to do, whether that's a Memorial Day parade or whatever. So, do I have a motion?
Who will approve funds to be spent out of this?
Council.
City council.
It'll be a recommending body like all others.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second that motion.
Please cast your votes.
Mr. Mayor, would it be a conflict of interest? We've got 2 vets on the council here. Would that be for them to serve on the board?
That's up to
If we
council.
chose that person from our ward? I can't think of better people.
If the council, that's what the council wants to do, I don't have a problem with that. I do think it's important to have citizens that are not on the council represented on a lot of these committees, but yet that obviously leaves more room, so I'd be open to that. Number 9 is adoption of resolution number 1504, approving a water conservation policy schedule and directing the city manager to implement the water conservation schedule as required. And I know that this was first discussed, I don't know if it was in council, but it was discussed at something I was involved in back in October. But I feel like we need some more information and work as to what triggers these conservation issues, the rationing and whatnot, and so I would motion to table this for a couple weeks till staff can get stuff put together, because I don't know that we have. I know that was discussed at one time, but I don't think that that ever happened. Does that make sense? Because there should be triggers that tell us when we need to start rationing and things of that nature.
I think you made a motion, I'll second that.
Do I have a
Motion to table.
Yes, motion to table. Please cast your votes. Item 10 is adoption of resolution number 1505, expressing support for State Question 794, the Crime Victim Rights Amendment, also known as Marcy's Law for Oklahoma. And we have Kim Moyer here with us, who is the state director for this effort. If you could come and kind of share with council and the audience what this is.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. Thank you very much for having us today. I'd like to also recognize Todd Pauley, who's one of our staff members, who's with me here today. And the Chief, thank you very much. So Marcy's Law for Oklahoma, State Question 794, is a crime victims' rights amendment that will be on the ballot in November, so everyone will have an opportunity to vote on it. We are in the process of working for the next 8 months to educate people about Marcy's Law and this amendment and how it will help crime victims across our state. While some of us may not be crime victims in the room, some of you probably know someone who is, and you know that it's a very, very difficult process to navigate the system in our state, and especially when you're under extreme stress and duress. When you've become a victim of crime, it makes it very, very difficult. What this amendment will do is basically elevate the crime victims' rights that we currently have in statute and raise those into the Oklahoma State Constitution. And it accomplishes a couple of things by doing that. What it does is it brings crime victims into closer equal standing with the rights that are given somebody who's accused of a crime. It also will give crime victims an elevated status in the court system so that they have a stronger voice, so that they can express themselves and have an actual system where they can participate more closely in the process during the investigation, the prosecution, and the punishment phase when crimes are committed. So what we're asking for you this evening is to consider this resolution. Your resolution that you're looking at today is modeled after one that was recently passed by the Oklahoma Municipal League, and it is very similar to resolutions that have already been passed by the City of Edmond, the City of the City of Muskogee, the City of Tahlequah, the City of the Village, and also Oklahoma City actually has this on their legislative agenda. So, I'm sorry? And Guthrie, sorry. I knew there was another one. I don't have the pleasure of living in the city of Bethany. I'm actually from Edmond. So I really appreciate this opportunity to speak with you and get to know you and talk with you, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I wholeheartedly support this, and I think it's great. And I have some information right here that I was given. If council or anybody would like to just see anything about this, or anyone else, I'll just leave it right here. But I think it's great that we have this opportunity to support this.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to ask a question. I have a great deal of respect for Mr. Phil Cole, our Chief of Police, and I'd like to know if he endorses this. If he does, I will.
Well, thank you, Mr. Todd. That's very kind. I wholeheartedly endorse this. This will, a lot of these safeguards are already in place for victims, but however, when you raise these to a constitutional level, every district court in the state of Oklahoma will take notice of this. And you are very familiar with the rights afforded to people accused of crimes, and equally important. The right to remain silent, the right to an attorney. Those are constitutional rights, both in the United States Constitution, also in the state Constitution. This will give that same sort of constitutional status on a state level to the victims of crime. One of the things that really stands out with this is, let's put ourselves in the situation of you're a victim of a violent crime. During the court process, you will have absolute communication on where the individual is. Maybe he's been released on bail. Wouldn't you, as a victim of a crime, like to know these things? Currently, in the state, there's quite a bit of resources for victims after the fact. They're victimized, their attacker goes to prison, they can get on a website and be notified when they're up for parole, can be notified when they're released, but we don't have those same kind of safeguards during the trial process. So I'm not saying that the victims' rights are more important, but they should be equally important, and they should be equally supported by the state constitution. So to answer your question, I'm in full favor of this, and not just as a law enforcement officer, but a father, a son, anybody that I know that's been a victim, I would want this for them just because it's the right thing to do. Any other questions, I'll be glad to try to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Cole.
And I think it's great that we're going to beat Oklahoma City to the punch.
Well, and one last note of consideration for you. So this measure also has currently been endorsed by the Oklahoma Association of Chiefs of Police, which is why your chief is so well versed on this, the Oklahoma Sheriff's Association, the Oklahoma District Attorney's Council, and several crime victims' rights advocates organizations across the state. Most of them being domestic violence service providers. Marcy's Law is named in honor of a woman who was murdered during a domestic violence homicide.
Mr. Mayor, I would make a motion to approve and adopt resolution number 1505 in support of State Question 794.
Please cast your votes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And for the record, I want everyone to realize that Mr. Todd did not respect at all that I wholeheartedly endorsed this. He needed Chief Cole to back him up, which I totally don't doubt him for doing that. Item 11 is approval of ordinance number 1955, amending the Bethany Code of Ordinances pertaining to licenses required and fees pertaining to alcoholic beverages. Item A is on reading by title only. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Please cast your votes.
An ordinance amending Title 11, Chapter 110, Section 110.02 of the Bethany Code of Ordinances pertaining to licenses required and fees therefore by revising the fee schedule for licenses for activities pertaining to alcoholic beverages, providing for repealer, severability, and declaring an emergency. This ordinance has 4 enacting sections and a separate Section 5. I included in your packet kind of a overview of the changes that are coming about on October 1st. Let me just review that in a nutshell for you. Beginning October 1, there will no longer be in Oklahoma Low Point beer, 3-2 beer it's sometimes called. That's what is now being sold in convenience stores, grocery stores, drugstores, all kinds of places sell beer. But strong beer has traditionally only been sold in liquor stores, as well as wine and stronger spirits. But effective October 1, there will be no more 3-2 beer. All beer will now be regulated by the Alcohol Beverage Control Board, and a license will be required by them, and a license could be either just beer, just wine, or both. And the state law, new state law, authorizes the city to adopt fees equivalent to what the state charges. And for someone who's going to sell both beer and wine, that'll be $1,500 annually. And that's substantially more than what we're currently receiving for just a beer license. There are a lot more changes to the law in that there will no longer be 3-2 beer or Low Point beer. So between now and October 1, I'll be bringing to you several amendments to your alcoholic beverage code to comply with this law. This is an area that, again, is preempted by the state. The city has very limited ability to regulate this. Primarily through zoning is the only way you can regulate it. So the reason this is on your agenda now, people don't want to wait till October 1 to get their license. They want to be ready to make money on October 1. So we're already receiving applications for these beer and wine licenses. Some of the convenience stores around, gas stations have already asked for them. So what this ordinance does is go ahead and put these fees in place for a license that won't become effective till October 1. And when we get to changing the ordinances, I'll give you more detail, but I think that little piece I put in your packet kind of gives you an overview of what you're dealing with.
Did I understand that the rate is the same for the state and the city?
Yes.
So they pay that amount twice?
Be $3,000 a year.
And
Right.
do they then pay the county or somebody
No,
else?
that's a county beer license.
Okay.
No, those will no longer exist. It's quite an overhaul of the entire alcohol regulation system, and there's still some unknown factors that will just have to be worked out. The ABC board still is working on rules on how they're going to enforce some of these things.
Do we know how many current liquor licenses we have in the city of Bethany?
Well, you'd have in Beth, I don't know the number, but let me tell you the types you have. You have a beer license, which Pizza Hut has, Walgreens has, Cash Savers has. But then you also have a liquor by the drink license, which Ding has, I believe the Mexican restaurant on 23rd Street, I can't think of the name of it right offhand, but they have a liquor by the drink license, and those will continue. What we're talking about is only consumption off the premises. There is an additional license fee for consumption on the premises. So, but those are all things that all the fees are covered here, but when we overhaul the code, you'll see that there'll be different rules that'll apply to all those. But I would say the majority of licenses we have now in Bethany are the Low Point beer licenses.
Is it fair to say that this is the beginning of the process to update our ordinances related to the sale and consumption of alcohol in Bethany based upon the state statute?
The state question that was passed 2 years ago, that's right.
So there's a lot more to come.
One thing that's kind of ironic about this is that certain counties in Oklahoma, I don't remember the number, but it's a small number, have never passed liquor by the drink. When this law goes into effect on October 1, if they don't vote on liquor by the drink, the Pizza Hut and the grocery store will have to quit selling beer because they won't be authorized. So it has some odd consequences.
Do I have a motion for item B, approval of sections 1 through 4?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Please cast your votes. Item C, section 5, ordinance 1955 is an emergency section. Do I have a motion?
This would be one from the people I've talked to. You and I talked to a guy Friday. There's 50,000 people trying to apply for these, and it is pretty important to them to get it in there pretty good. So I would ask, on behalf of a couple of those guys on 39th that own businesses, that we go ahead and put this through.
Emergency?
Yeah, emergency, for the emergency clause.
Do I have a second for the emergency section?
So moved.
Please cast your votes. Item 12 is approval of artist contract with Nick Bear for the library interior art project. Do I have a motion or questions?
Motion to approve.
Do I have a
Second.
second? Please cast your votes.
Now that you approve that, I might remind you that this is for the artwork on the inside wall of the library. I believe it's being paid for by funds from the Bethany Improvement Foundation, and the approximate amount is $15,000 in round numbers.
Item 13 is approval of right-of-way agreement with MCI Metro Access Transmission Services Corp., doing business as Verizon Access Transmission Services. This was tabled last council meeting at my request, and I would like to explain that I have a meeting with Verizon and representatives on April 12th to find out more information, and so I'd like to make a motion to table this until after that meeting. Do I have a second?
Yes.
Please cast your votes. Item 14 is consideration and possible approval of Garver Engineering non-revenue water loss study, task 2. Mr. Caton, would you like to come forward? But you sat there patiently all night long.
Good evening, council. Is this, yes. I wish I had a recommendation on this one, but I don't. As we talked about, Garver was tasked to do a non-revenue water loss study, and we set the contract up to do it in steps, 5 distinct steps. And whether we proceed with the next step depends on the results of the previous step. Well, step 1 is done, and that was the initial survey, basically, of all our data. And it came up and said, yes, if we do an aggressive but reasonable goal, we could save 22 to 35 million gallons per year in losses, which sounds like a lot of water. What it really comes down to is about 42 to 57 gallons a minute, depending on what year you use as a basis, which roughly is about half of one of our lower producing wells. Okay, so that's a reasonable target to set to maybe get our losses reduced. To move on to the next task costs $42,720. I don't have a recommendation because I don't know. If it had been 20 gallons a minute, I would say, no, it's not worth it. If it had been 100 gallons a minute, I would have said, yes, it's definitely worth it. It's right in the middle. I don't know what to recommend. It's just one of those things. We are in the middle of as you all know, with our situation in the well fields, we need every drop we can get. This is not a guarantee we'll be able to find the leaks. They will set up, monitor 25 miles of pipe, do all kinds of nighttime surveys to see where the flows are going and pinpoint areas to look for, but this is no guarantee we'd even get it. They do believe we could aggressively go after that kind of a number. Our numbers right now look very good for a municipality in our situation. We're actually doing a quite good job of water loss, but this would take it to the next level. Again, I wish I could recommend one or the other, but we're right in the middle. If you think it's worth $42,720 to move ahead on the hopes of gaining back half a well, I could certainly support that and see why you'd want to do it. On the other hand, if you think maybe we need a bigger strategy or something before we move forward with spending that kind of money, I can certainly understand that position as well. That's a really bad answer, but right now it's the only one I have.
I have a really bad question.
Yes.
How much would a well that produces 100 gallons a minute cost us?
$250,000.
So
Plus the pipe to get it to the plant.
Approximately 20% of what this study would cost us 20%.
Right. Again, this study would not guarantee we would get that, but the engineers think that would be a realistic goal if we aggressively went after it.
Mr. Caton, Mr. Mayor, if I may. In essence, this is an audit of our water lines.
Correct.
And we would know exactly what condition the water lines are in.
Not exactly, but it would certainly give us areas that we would know to look and see what's going on. It would tell us, like I say, for instance, they measure nighttime flows, which should be very, very low. And if they see certain lines using more than can be explained, we would have a good idea there's a leak in that system somewhere.
So this would be a third party coming in, doing an independent audit of our water lines to confirm where we need to make repairs.
That is correct.
And we could rely on that to the extent that that would be solid information, and it would provide guidelines and a priority list for our Public Works Department to go fix these problems.
That's exactly right.
In my opinion, I think it's money well spent, and I think I could probably pinpoint some parts in Ward 2 that need to be looked at.
Will it pinpoint leaks? You just said, you
No.
made a mention of lines. Are they just gonna
No,
give?
it will not say you need to dig a hole here. It will tell us which of the main lines that they're measuring. They will actually measure up to 25 miles of our pipe. They will literally strap a meter on and measure the acoustic leak detection systems and things like that. They will also do some statistical analyses of our tank levels and things at various times of day, and they have some other tricks they can do that I'm not quite expert in. But basically, they will come down and estimate what our leakages are. When I say leakages, it may not necessarily be leakages. It may be unauthorized uses. It may not necessarily be leaking. It may just mean you're using a lot of water here, not commensurate with what you're metering, so that means somebody's using it without it being metered. It could be those.
Are you talking like down to the city block, or just this
No.
section of town has leak? I
No,
mean, how?
Each water main, it's hard to describe because the system is actually a big network and all the pipes are connected to each other. But they can actually, we have 3 main transmission line coming from the plant, so that would be the logical place to start and see which one, and then you can break it down within each of those 3 issues to get it into quarter section blocks or something in that, along those lines, to at least get you into where it would be. It may just be a series of small leaks. It may, if it was a big one, they're easy to spot because they come out of the pipe or come out of the ground somewhere. But this would at least give us a good place to start on where to start looking, and maybe even go on further measurements.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, Mr. Caton, so what you're saying is if we have a water line that connects to the connection from a private line, are those lines going to be audited, for lack of a better term, related to potential leaks?
No, not individuals, no.
But we can narrow the scope and find that area, and then allow our department
Correct.
to go in there and make an assessment as to what needs to be repaired.
That is correct. There are, I'm gonna say guidelines, rules of thumb, all that. If you know there's say a quarter-mile section, you know how much water should be going into that area. And if they're measuring a lot more going into that area, that gives you a heads up that something's going on there that you probably need to do some more investigation, whether it's leak detection or looking for maybe some interesting, nice green grass when everyone else is brown and stuff like that. There are things you can do along those lines. Again, no guarantee you're gonna find a drop, but the engineers do believe that is a good aggressive number we could shoot for.
Let me give you an example of another city I represented. They did something similar to this, and they found an illegal connection onto the main water line that was tapped into a pond with a float valve on it, and it was filling up a large pond, running almost constantly because the pond didn't hold water. And you could have, that's not likely in Bethany, but you could have illegal connections to large sprinkler systems or something like that.
Sure.
So,
I mean, I don't wanna call people names. It could have been something historically, long time ago, when water was too cheap to meter, that everybody thought was plugged a long time ago, and it wasn't. I mean, you don't know what you're gonna find out there.
But you could also find corroded lines that
You
need
could find
to be
corroded
replaced.
lines,
There are probably plenty of those in Ward 2, just putting that on the record.
Mr. Mayor, when this item first became forth, the amount of discrepancy between what was leaving our water plant and what was being sold, I thought to be an astronomical number. And I'm the one that pushed the thing, and I recommended this study to be done. And now that we've had this first phase study done, I read it in its entirety, and in 3 different places in there, it says we are well within the standards or the limits of, what's the term I'm looking for, the acceptable, the standard. And so after I see that stuff that we're pumping out of our water plant that's not being metered, and there's a whole list there. City Hall, for example, and the City Hall watering, and the pool, and Public Works, and et cetera, et cetera. I'm not sure that I'm justifying additional $42,000 is justified, because then once you spend that, then they're gonna wanna come back and say, well, for an additional sum of money, we'll do some more looking, and it just seemed to be a never-ending expenditure to save a few gallons of water. I'm not in favor of it, is what I'm saying.
And I'm stuck in the middle, because we know we have loss, and we have to be very diligent about our water quantity and our water quality. And I think we as a council are very serious about that. So I have a hard time dismissing this tonight, quite honestly, because of the expense. I'm like Mr. Caton.
Well, I would look at it just like a payback on like an investment in your house, like a solar system. I mean, how long would it take us if we found X amount of leaks to do a payback for this? I mean,
If we find the leaks and we avoid paying $1,250, $1,000 from Oklahoma City, then yes, it's going to pay for itself in a hurry. But again, I don't want anybody to think this is a guarantee. Mr. Todd, you brought up our leakage rate. It's slowly creeping up. It runs 14 to 15%. This, if we get to the target they're shooting for, would get that number down to 8 or 9%, which would be a really, really good number.
so 6% of our water revenues, I mean, it'd pay for itself in a very short period of time.
It could.
Mr. Mayor, I was concerned that we don't have meters on our city facilities. And I would hate to have the study show that we were the people who were the big users. So I think it would be wise for us to put meters on our city facilities before we conduct the study.
I'm good with that. That's not that expensive, is it?
To put a meter in?
Putting the meters.
No.
The thing of it is the percentage of our revenue that comes from water is an incredibly high number.
It is important, though, that when we were conducting that study, or when they were conducting that study, that the amount that was being used by the facilities that are not metered was taken out of that number. And it was estimated and taken out by the police department, the fire department. We do meter this building now. We don't meter the parks. We do meter the swimming pool. And so a lot of it was covered, but then there's a lot of it that's not metered, and we estimated what the usage would be on that. So that's not part of that study, but it's still, it needs to, those facilities need to be metered.
Yes, they were estimated. It would be nice to have real numbers. Yeah.
After all the metering is done and was done, we'd still be losing 13 to 15%.
Yes.
I sure hate to lose that off my bottom line, 13 to 15% of my business.
I said it before, I'll say it again. We're pretty average as far as somebody in our situation. Maybe we can't afford to be average anymore. Maybe we need to do better than that. Is it worth $42,000? That's why you guys are getting the big bucks. Make that decision.
Why don't you kind of tell them, Mr. Caton, what's beyond step 2?
Yeah.
I wish I had it in front of me. The next steps would be more, this will pretty much nail down what our unauthorized or non-revenue water losses are. Beyond that, it's going to be, are they real or are they apparent? Apparent meaning, is it a metering issue? Now, that's not going to save us any money to fix our metering accuracy, if that turns out that's all it is. But it certainly would, it's not going to save us any water, but it might bring in more revenue. If our meters are only 95% accurate, then maybe that would be 5% more revenue we would bring in. Won't save any water, we're still using the water, but at least now we get to charge people for all of it instead of just 95% of it. contrary to what some people believe, meters do not read high, they read low. So if there are inaccuracies, they will be bringing in more money. But that would be the next steps would be, okay, we've identified whether they're real losses or apparent losses, and now we can start moving in on meter accuracy studies and things like that. But again, you cannot go to that next step if you choose not to do so.
Let me ask you a question. Can I cut to the chase on Mr. Todd's point? Are these people in the water line replacement business or the meter selling business?
Neither.
Either one.
They're engineers.
Okay.
Is that the last step, the one you just described?
I wish
in
I had
the
it in front of me.
contract?
I do not have it, I don't think.
I was thinking there were 4 steps.
There were 5, actually. The non-revenue water assessment is what we just completed. The leak detection survey is next. The meter assessment and meter testing would be in there. After all that was in, then there's the conceptual design and high priority replacement list. The engineers aren't here. I think that's just them trying to drum up some more engineering business. We could probably do that on our own. But the meter assessment and meter testing, we cannot do, and that would be the next revenue type step on.
Are each of those steps probably $40,000?
No, those are the conceptual design is 13,000. The meter assessment's 15,000. Meter testing is about 6,000. The replacement list has a 0 on it for now. So that would just be a culmination of all of it. So the next step, the leak detection survey, is actually the most expensive at $42,000.
Mr. Todd's point is, it changes numbers, looking at, instead of 42, 80, 75, 80,000 bucks instead of.
Yeah, the total contract was for 87.7 was the total, all the steps together, not to exceed.
So we're talking roughly half of this.
Roughly half of it is the next step, yes, sir.
Mr. Caton, I may have missed this, but if we were to approve this, what's the length of time to complete that study? Is there an
They were
estimate?
bothering me last week. They had a schedule where they could move us in real fast. I don't know if we moved fast enough for them. We may have missed another scheduling. They're out of Tulsa, I think, but they were in the city doing some. So I'm not sure exactly when we would make it if we approve it tonight.
But you made mention that we have progressed a little bit more loss over time.
I'm just looking at our normal internal, and it's just for the last 18 to 24 months, you can kind of see everything kind of headed up a little bit. I'm not sure why. I can't tell you why, but I would.
Could that be wear on gears within meters?
No. No. Meters read low, not high.
Mr. Mayor, make a motion to adopt item number 14 and approve the Garber Engineers non-revenue water loss study.
I second it.
Please cast your votes. And again, I would just like to say that being average is not good enough, and to be above average, there's a price to be paid, and I think this is a small price to try to get our citizens the best water possible and make sure we're not wasting it.
At the lowest cost we could possibly afford.
Item 15 is Planning and Zoning Commission Ward 2 appointment of Stephanie Bernathy. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Please cast your votes.
Mark Long was previously on the P&Z and resigned.
Yes.
Yes.
Item 16 is a report from Charter Review Committee Chairman Randy Lunstra.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council, good evening. We'll try to make this as brief as possible. I know you guys want to go home at some point tonight, according to the agenda. First of all, I'd like to thank you for allowing us to serve in this capacity. It was a very educational process. We had a great committee assembled. Some of those people that I'd like to recognize, Dr. Farmer, who is here tonight. Jason Rogers was our secretary. Brad Blystone, who is here tonight, Gilbert Carlson, who is here tonight, Rachel Bowler-Jack, and Nick Pittman, who is also in the audience, and Derek Stills. And we'd like to thank those people. We have been serving since August, 2 meetings a month. And the questions that you have proposed to us to explore, we have explored quite in depth, many, many hours of discussion. I would like to thank also David Davis and April Collins and the city staff for assisting us in the guidance and information process that we used and applied. We tried to do our best to apply forward thinking and logic and reason, applying these questions to not only the comprehensive plan, the local ordinances and laws, state law, in some cases, case precedents, and to make sure that we have covered all of our bases. So we are a recommending body to you. Once we propose these recommendations, you can do what you want to with it. You may adopt any and all, whatever you choose to do. It is your information and to use as you wish. During the process, if you choose to propose these to the vote of the people, then we will be there with you to educate and to guide you along the process. If you're involved in the comprehensive plan at all, or the library for that matter, we went in depth with the citizens and figured out what they wanted exactly and used their information responses back to us as guidance to make these projects happen. So just remember that once this is handed to you, it is yours. And if you decide on any or all of the questions that we have been proposed, we will be there with you to assist and guide in the education of the citizens. The charter itself, for those of you who are not, I'm not talking to you now, but for those people who are not familiar with it, is a 17-page document, first adopted in 1953. Mr. Shirey, I believe your father was one of the original authors. Is that what you had indicated? So that kind of puts a humbling aspect to this entire process. Right. But thanks to people like that, it still exists and still applies and is a very well-written document. It was adopted in 1985, or amended in 1985, and again in 2003. And those have stood the test of time until today. They still are applied. The first thing that I would like for you to understand is I assume you have those in front of you, the hard copies and or email. The first thing I want you to notice, it is a very simple and concise document. The report itself was fashioned to assist or to allow the general public and ourselves to understand it and comprehend what its application is by first read. So if it seems simple, it is by design that it is simple. We didn't want to convolute it. We wanted it to pass the first time that it was given to the people to vote on. So if you notice that it's simple, it is simple by intent. So with that, I will proceed with the report itself. This won't take long. Unless you want to take longer, we certainly can. The first item was is in regards to the density issue. Now, what happened back in 1973, is that correct, David?
I think that's right.
The city council had a movement to limit apartment complexes. What they did was adopted the issue of no more than 12 units per acre, and that was what they called a density process. Now, let me read off what the first one was. It won't take long to read this one. It's really simple. The existing density issue that we have in our charter says, the erection, construction, or alteration, and that's a key word, alteration, of any dwelling unit or units of a greater density than 12 dwelling units per acre is hereby prohibited by the City of Bethany, Oklahoma, except for student housing owned by accredited public or private educational institutions of higher learning within the City of Bethany, Oklahoma, and except for dwelling units located within the Central Business Zoning District. And then they provide a definition of what dwelling units is. So what we have done in hopes of formatting a positive application to this, we have taken out, so I'm going to say this, we have taken out the word alteration from the first sentence. Now the key part about that is this alteration word did not allow apartment owners or management to upgrade or basically improve the apartments just about at any level. What that did was it allowed the, go ahead.
I don't know if we're open discussion or not, but I just, I don't agree with this
Let
change.
me finish then.
But the largest alteration done and total remodel was in the metro. You know where that was done? 23rd and Council in Bethany. So there's already a workaround for the word alterations.
Okay. Well, it goes further, way past the apartment complexes, if you will. So the density issue in the alteration, we left out the alteration. And so the wording says, the erection or construction of any dwelling unit or units of greater density than 12 dwelling units per acre is hereby prohibited by or within the City of Bethany, Oklahoma, except, and the additional, the next two are the same as the original. And then the third one we added was, the third exception was dwelling units approved as part of a planned unit development in accordance with the City of Bethany Comprehensive Planning and Zoning Ordinances. Now, if you're familiar with the planned unit developments at all, which if you're a developer in Oklahoma or Oklahoma City or Bethany itself, you will know what a planned unit development is. Now, for those of you who don't know what that is, it is a process within our planning and zoning or the process of development, which allows a developer to specify exactly what he wants to do. Now, when one specifies a project, Mr. Shire, as you were well familiar with construction, you pretty much do what you need to do in the plan itself, and then you implement the plan. Now, before that ever gets to the building phase of the construction process, it comes before the planning and zoning. Step one, planning and zoning. Step two, community development is involved with probably before step one. So community development, planning and zoning, and then you as a council can also put your stamp of approval or alteration on this process itself. So you have three basic steps before a developer can go through the process of a planned unit development. So, Mr. Moore, I'm very aware that you are not in favor of this process because of wording.
My voters are in favor of it.
I'm sorry?
The citizens.
Right, but it goes a lot further than that. I know down in Ward 1, the 23rd Street developments are critical that they go. This allows not only for the planned unit development process to be applied in creative multi-unit rezoning, which means you can have commercial and residential together on a planned unit development. It also provides for redevelopment opportunities, redistricting areas, and I hope that really flies, because currently the Central Business District is the only place that we would be able to use that. For instance, if we had a developer come in and wanted to put loft apartments, say, in the Western Oaks Tower. We couldn't do it. It's not in one of the districts, it's not educational, it's not in the Central Business District, but it's a great idea. Great idea. So within this planned unit development process, you, the council, ultimately would have the ability to alter, suggest, or mandate what happens within that development process. So that is basically the nutshell of the density issue proposal that we delved into. Now, keep in mind that you as a council, this is your information, our recommendation to you. You may do with it as you see fit, literally. You can set it aside, you can propose it for a vote of the people, whatever you choose to do.
I have a couple questions.
Yes, sir.
Was there any review of the applicable state and federal law to confirm that this would be a legal document that would prevent any further or future litigation?
You mean the review that we proposed?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely not. This is just a recommendation for you, and you may alter it as you see fit.
Well, I'm confused because I thought that was why we were doing this. We were trying to get a recommendation to the city council to determine and discuss all of the issues that would be related to altering the charter regarding the 12 units per acre.
That's exactly right.
So did anybody do a legal brief that said that this addition will fly under Oklahoma law, under federal law?
Well, the citizens of Bethany will be the one voting on it.
Well,
after you propose.
Then my question is, did you guys understand whether or not this was legal before you made the recommendation to the city council?
Our lawyer proposed this and was with us every step of the way.
Okay, so
Let me answer that. I was involved in this. There were a lot of options considered. First of all, the original provision that's in the charter, that has been litigated, and it went to the Oklahoma Court of Appeals and was affirmed. Okay, what we were trying to do, though, that was the most limiting. That was before it even allowed an exception for downtown or for the university. That was upheld. What the committee wanted to do was to try to make this fit better with the recommendations of the comprehensive plan. And the plan unit development is a recognized development tool under the Oklahoma statutes. And I believe that that is defensible, yes. And I did look at that issue.
now, there's no mention of any specific districts. When you mention that's outside of a PUD. Is that correct?
Plan unit development can be in any zoning district.
CBD doesn't.
Well, but my question is, for example, in Ward 2, if we have a district with its own specified ordinances related to development, how would that apply to the charter? Do we know?
Well, a planned unit development, of course, we haven't seen the rewrite of the ordinance yet. And the charter committee struggled with that a little bit, tried to get some edification about how the ordinance was going to look, and we didn't achieve that. Let's say that. But to answer your question, unless there's something really out of the ordinary about this rewrite, a planned unit development will be allowable in every zoning district in Bethany. And that's pretty typical, that it's not, for instance, a planned unit development could have uses that are permitted in residential, commercial, and industrial all in one district. I mean, in one planned unit development.
And my problem is not putting it to a vote of the people at all, because in 1985, the city was divided. It was a mess. Oh, because the apartments were just going up so fast, and we already have a disproportionate rental to ownership ratio in this town. It's still a problem. But, if we want to put it for the people, just removing that, the pass vote, just to get rid of the 12 dwelling units per acre, put it to the people. But this is a workaround. It's a workaround from what the original vote was, and that's why I just think it's disingenuous to do it this way. If we're gonna do it, let's just put it to a vote to get rid of it.
But this is just a recommendation, and then we, the council, can, like he said multiple times, can do with it whatever we want. Correct?
Did you talk about any number other than 12? I mean, I don't know where 12 units per acre came from, but it seems to be sacrosanct in this community. Did you talk about 10, 20, 18? I mean,
We
any other
did.
number or no number at all?
We did. We talked about no number at all as well.
12 units per acre is about somewhere between a triplex and a fourplex kind of development. That's about what that boils down to.
Any further questions on item 1? Okay. Yes, sir.
So explain to me again how this will, as recommended, improve our current state of apartments in Bethany. It will allow the current apartment owners to upgrade their apartment complexes because there's no limitation. Is that right?
No, it just simply takes the language out of the first one that's mentioned alteration. It takes that language out.
So they can now, if this is put to the people, they can make alterations pursuant to the charter to improve their apartment complex.
Which we would hope they would.
Okay.
That's a moot point. I mean, I don't think anybody's hearing me here. The largest alteration in the entire metro was done where? Bethany,
Council.
Oklahoma. So there's already a workaround for alterations. That's a moot point. Millions of dollars.
David, can you explain to us the process of how that
Well,
got?
I think the difference is that alteration didn't involve any change in the number of units, and I don't believe any buildings were torn out and rebuilt. That's the question. I think if someone wanted to buy, say, 16th and Rockwell, which is a giant complex, and tear some of the units out and maybe put some townhouses in or something, that's where you would run afoul of that alteration language. I think not just putting new facade on and remodeling the inside.
So anybody can remodel to their little heart's content?
Yeah, that wasn't intended to prevent remodeling.
So then it just comes down to code enforcement if they're needing to be upgraded or whatever, right?
Yeah, I wasn't involved in the permits for 23rd and Council, but I've driven through there, and it just appears that the outsides were refurbished, new siding, new windows, new doors.
They gutted them too.
And I assume the insides were completely redone as well. And having been in there on a couple of occasions, once on a criminal investigation, I can vouch for that they needed that.
Well, let's just say, according to our comprehensive plan, for instance, if somebody were to come in and take the first, pick a footage, 200 feet of the apartment complexes along Rockwell, bulldoze those, rezone it, it couldn't happen because of that word alteration, which it desperately needs to be done. But that's the whole point. And it goes way past just the density of apartment complexes themselves.
So to continue your hypothetical, let's say they bulldoze it, and then they would apply for a PUD to make that development, depending upon the qualifications and that statute, and then P&Z approval and all of that. So that would be the altered process based upon this recommendation.
That's correct.
Well, in addition to, the council would have review of that PUD and would have any input as to what you would like to see on there as well. And ones we've had in the past would be like, there's a apartment complex abutting a residential neighborhood. And so you could say you wanted trees back there for noise buffering, or an 8-foot fence or a 10-foot fence instead of a 4-foot fence. Those types of things are allowed and managed under a PUD, starting from the staff level all the way to you, this body.
And that is assuming that we have applicable ordinances that will codify the provisions in the comprehensive plan, right?
Help me, David, help me if I'm wrong, but I think you can make those recommendations regardless of ordinance. Is that correct?
You know, at this point, we really don't know what the ordinance that's being prepared is going to look like. But we know that that ordinance is going to have a planned unit development component. You've got 2 planners in here. They'll hopefully verify what I've said. I haven't seen a zoning ordinance in 20 years that didn't have a planned unit development component. And that was the basis for this being in there, knowing that we couldn't get any information about how to mesh the charter with the new ordinance because we don't know what the new ordinance is. But this, I believe, would fit with any version of a zoning ordinance that would be prepared.
The function of the P&Z, they're the acting body that will implement and recommend the ordinance, and they will also use the charter as well as their responsibilities in order to get that up to date. Is that right?
That's correct. It'll be recommended by the consulting group, but it'll ultimately have to be approved by the Planning Commission and the council after public hearings.
And the comprehensive plan?
So it's fair to say the P&Z would do the heavy lifting to make a recommendation to City Council, and that's their responsibility, right?
Correct. Well, they haven't, because the 12 dwelling units per acre in Bethany is a hot potato, and it's usually passed on without a recommendation.
So I think that this is a wonderful challenge for the P&Z, and I look forward to their recommendation now that we have the charter review process completed.
For the sake of time, could we move on, because you said
Sure.
item 1, so.
Yes, you betcha. And we can make this as fast as you want. The second item was up for us. We were asked to look at the term limits of council members and mayor. And so this is a new section that is not addressed currently. They are the only part of the charter that addresses terms at all is that it simply says that it will be a 4-year term. So we added we recommended that we add a new section, and I'll read it for the record. Council members and the mayor shall not serve more than 3 consecutive 4-year terms. No mayor or council member, after serving the maximum number of terms, may serve in the same elective position until he has been out of office for no less than 2 years. Election or appointment to a partial term shall not count towards the eligibility limitation. Election or appointment to a full term shall count towards the limitation, even if he or she does not serve the entire term. So this limitation will become effective at the first city election for election of candidates following its adoption, and terms of office served prior to the effective date of these limitations shall not be used in computing term limits. Okay?
What that's saying is that once it's adopted, even if you've been on here 40 years, you can still serve 12 more.
Mr. Shirey?
Then you sit out a couple of years and you can do it again.
Right, exactly. Exactly. Amen. Item number 3. The question was proposed to us, should a council member with a non-expiring term be required to resign to run for mayor? That's it. You'll find this in section 6-3 of your charter. The committee recommends no change to the charter requiring resignation to run for mayor. Any questions on that one? Great. Number 4, the question was proposed to us. new residency requirements for city attorney, city judge, fire chief, police chief, and possibly department heads. We could not see the legitimacy of department heads, so we, with David's help, drafted the following section. The municipal attorney, municipal judge, fire chief, and police chief shall be qualified electors in the city of Bethany, except to the extent that the same is prohibited by applicable state law. The city council may waive this requirement by a 2/3 majority vote of all council members where the residency requirement would result in an unnecessary hardship or deprive the city of the most qualified candidates. Now, language-wise, that would be added and simply have 2 parts, one in the municipal judge and one in the municipal attorney, stricken from the paragraph where it says the city attorney shall be a qualified elector of the city, and the other one on section 5.2, the municipal judge shall be qualified elector of the city. So those 2 items would simply be struck, and the section added that I read. Questions? We're almost finished.
I'm not opposed to that issue, but I also realize this Bethany being the size that it is, I would think that the reason might be to get people here in a hurry. And so if they lived within a certain district or a certain distance from City Hall or whatever, that could be included. So they would have to be 20 minutes from or 10 miles from or something additional, just for what it's worth.
Well, we understand the concept, and that was totally discussed. Depending on where, let's just say a robbery occurred at 16th and Council, and the police chief lived at 63rd and May. Obviously, it's further from your ward to 16th and or Rockwell or Council. The distances are kind of relevant, but yet not, in the fact that depending on where who lives, did I say that right? Depending on where who lives, it could be further or closer. So we understand that, and that was very much part of the discussion.
So it was really for the political reason of living within the city boundary.
And we just felt better oversight would be had with those folks living in the city.
And the compromise that was reached was putting an escape clause in so it could be waived under proper circumstances. So, and that doesn't currently exist in the charter. It says the judge and the city attorney must reside in the city limits.
Any questions? Item number 5, the question was brought to us for abstention from voting. This is a council action, and it was rather lengthy in discussion with us. That says our recommendation was the Charter Review Committee recommends that this item be addressed within the city council rules rather than as a charter amendment. That was our recommendation to you. Item number 6, the question was brought to us, should the city council approve hiring of an assistant city manager? The Charter Review Committee does not recommend this change to the charter. Now, something I found in my research within the last few days anyway, the charter itself does not address assistant city managers at all. It addresses acting city managers. So the difference is, if you have an assistant city manager in office and the city manager, there is no relevance to that in our charter as far as an assistant city manager. So that was just an interesting one to me. If you want to dive into that one, it's in section 710, and the acting city manager section is in 3.2. So the Charter Review Committee did not recommend a change to that charter at all. The item number 7, the last one, everybody gives a round of applause. Should council members be elected at large rather than by ward? And should the number of council members be reduced from 9 to 5? That is not a time frame during the day, that is a number of members. The Charter Review Committee does not recommend at-large elections for council members or reduction in the number of council members. You'll find that one, it basically addresses in section 2.2 that there shall be 2 council members per ward in 4 wards. Any questions on the report?
Did
Thank
your
you.
committee unanimously recommend this to us?
It did.
Thank you.
Do I have a motion to receive the report?
So moved.
I second receiving the report.
We're just
Um,
receiving the report, just like we did earlier tonight on another report.
Could we ask a question?
Sure.
So what you were recommending here is that essentially there would be 2 items on a charter election. One would be about the PUD and taking out the word alterations relating to apartments. And then the second would be the change of term limits, actually 3, I guess. And then the third would be taking out the necessity of the municipal judge and the city attorney living in Bethany.
Correct. The only thing I would add to that would be the density. The item number 1 is adding the 3rd sentence regarding the planned unit development.
Right.
But yes, that is correct.
Thank you. And thank you for the work you all did on this. I know you put a lot of hours into it.
Well, the group that was formed was an amazing group, well diverse. For your knowledge on term limits, Dr. Farmer has written at least 1 book. I have a signed copy at home. 2 books. If you've ever read a term limit book, kudos to you. If you've ever written one, major kudos to you.
It's a for all of the other political science majors in the world, it's good bedtime reading.
Amen.
Could the Charter Review Committee please stand up? I'd like to thank you for all the effort you've gone to do this. I have a motion and I have a second of receiving the report. Please cast your votes. Item 17 is a proposed executive session for purposes of discussion of appointment of interim city manager as authorized by 25 Oklahoma Statute, Section 307B1 of the Oklahoma Open Meetings Act, which provides authorization for an executive session for purposes of discussing the employment, hiring, appointment, promotion, demotion, disciplining, or resignation of any individual salaried public officer or employee. I'd like to say before I call for the motion to go in executive session that this is simply as a result of health issues. Steve, as many of us know, has had open heart surgery recently, and he has a back that bothers him tremendously. And so he came to me and Mr. Davis and just asked if this is something that could take place because he is needing to back up into his position. So nobody's health is worth anything. So he has grandchildren, and we want him to be around to enjoy that. So do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Please cast your votes. Will council and Mr. Davis join me in executive session? Item 18. Item 18 is consideration and possible approval of appointment of interim city manager and establish compensation for interim city manager. First of all, I'd like to tell Mr. Harsman thank you for stepping up and filling in for the second time in the city's history. So,
You're welcome.
and I want you to get your back well and everything else.
Well, that's the plan.
Do I have a motion for approval of the appointment of John Robinson for the interim city manager?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Please cast your votes.
Okay, John, unanimous.
Item 19 is call to the public. Do we have anyone that would like to address the council? So please step forward and address your, thank you, Gilbert, for not getting up. Item 20, city attorney's report.
All my items were on the agenda.
Item 21, city manager's report.
All the items are on the agenda.
22, council members' announcements, comments, and proposals. Let's start down at Mr. Palmer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we've seen on television in the last couple of days that there's a crisis related to education in the state of Oklahoma. I've posted on Facebook several times, and I am in full support of the teachers of Oklahoma, and I would beg and plead that the legislature and the governor get together and make something happen to fund the education of our children in the state of Oklahoma. I look forward to seeing what's going to happen, and I think something will happen. I don't know if anyone's going to like it, but that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
I'll say ditto and pass.
I'm
Mr.
good,
Todd?
Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Mr. Moore?
Just real quick, on that, I totally support the teachers, but the next time that the public is looked at countywide to support a sin tax or tobacco or gambling or any of that stuff, it was supposed to cure all our teacher problems and make them the highest paid teachers in the United States. That money got squandered. I don't know where it still goes. It's amazing, but the next time they come and say, we're from the government, we're here to help you, I hope that the voters don't listen to them. The other thing is the dispatchers, they are amazing. I mean, I can't dispatch my household. They gotta keep track of where all the police are at all times. If they need backup, they don't. Is it fire bad? They really are. It's organized chaos, and yet you have to be good at it. The other thing is, I know 2 councilmen have asked about the stump grinding. I guess Phil left. I was gonna ask him, the negotiations left here, mainly the mayor, but the council and mayor negotiated the removal of the trees, grind the stumps, get rid of them and everything. It was renegotiated at Public Works to cut the trees, and then we would grind them up. Well, tonight we just passed their 25-year franchise agreement, and I feel kind of like we got shafted. I'd like to know what happened. Again, as a third request, between here and there, it got renegotiated, where OG&E was gonna take out the trees, grind the stumps. It was renegotiated over there. We'll take out the trees. They'll take out the trees and we'll grind the stumps. No idea why that happened, but I would like to know, John, I guess, if you could ask around about that, please. But-
Mr. Moore, I have a little bit of an answer on that.
Yeah.
I think part of the problem was that the original agreement was negotiated up here, and then the actual work being done out there was negotiated with somebody else.
Exactly.
And I think that their arborist did not agree that they would actually do the grinding of the stumps. And he said that that was something that they never did, that they would have to hire another company to come in and do the grinding. And so he just told us that that would be our job to grind the stumps. So we've about got them done now.
I understand we're about done. That's not the way you negotiate. I mean, that's like having two construction companies negotiate, and the guys raising the 2x4s are renegotiating the deal. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, that stuff's gotta not happen. I mean, there's no telling what we spent grinding those things down between manpower and rental and overhead and G&A, I mean, it's just crazy. But that kind of stuff can't happen. That's all I got, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Herron?
I have nothing tonight. Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. McCutcheon?
I have nothing either, Mayor. Thank you.
All my items were on the
Mr. Knapp?
I just have a couple of thanks and a couple of congratulations. Thank you, Steve, for your work as our interim. Congratulations, JR, for being our new interim. Ronnie Bacon, 30 years, man. Thank you for your service. And lastly, thank our dispatchers. They do some incredible work over there under incredible stress loads. I think a couple of those might have been some of the former students from the organization that I work for. So congratulations and thank you.
I'd just like to say that something I was thinking about today is that if we don't believe in ourselves, no one else ever will. And I think it is our responsibility and obligation to believe in ourselves as individuals, as families, and as a community. And I think it's our responsibility as a city council and staff to inspire and help our citizens believe for better as well. And I think we've been doing a really good job of that. I do always strive for more and think we can do better, because if we believe it, then they're going to get to experience it and they're going to believe it too. There are a lot of doubters out there, and if we can silence the doubts in our own heads and our own minds and our own fears, we're going to prove a lot of people that what's capable with our community and our city. And I don't strive to prove the doubters wrong. I strive to try to prove those that believe correct and right. And I know God believes in us, and I'm reminded that if God is for us, who can be against us? And so I'm seriously looking forward to our city and where we're going and what we're going to accomplish. And I would just like to remind council of that, so that we're not sharing the doubtful stories, but for the hopeful stories. And I know our citizens will follow suit. So just something I was thinking about today. Item 23 is new business. Do we have any new business? With no new business, I declare us adjourned until April 17th, 2018. With that, I call to order the Bethany Public Works Authority. Item 1, A and B is a consent docket. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Please cast your votes. Item 2 is new business. Do we have any new business? With no new business, I declare us adjourned until April 17th, 2018. I call to order the Bethany Hospital Trust. Item 1, A and B is a consent docket. Do I have a motion of approval?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Please cast your votes. I would also like to say that last week there was a movie filmed on the second floor of our Bethany Hospital, and my wife and I got to go over and meet a couple actors over there, and we told them we look forward to them coming back to the city of Bethany and filming more movies. So I think we need to be film friendly, and I think that's pretty stinking cool. You never know, we might actually end up in a movie sometime. Just saying. Item 2 is new business. Do we have any new business? With no new business, I declare us adjourned until April 17th, 2018. I call to order the Bethany Development Authority. Item 1, A and B is consent docket. Do I have a motion of approval?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Please cast your votes. Item 2 is new business. Do we have any new business? With no new business, I declare us adjourned until April 17th, 2018. And with that, we are adjourned.